The sun was just rising, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. The morning air smelled of fresh earth, and birds chirped loudly in the distance. In the middle of the bustling town market, an old man walked slowly, carrying a cloth bag in his hand. His steps were steady, his back slightly bent, and his clothes were simple, too simple. His kurta had patches stitched across the shoulders, and his trousers were faded from years of washing and sunlight. His shoes were torn at the edges. To the busy eyes of the townsfolk, he was just another poor farmer, blending into the crowd of vendors and workers. But what they didn't know was that this man, this humble, quiet figure, was not only the owner of vast farmland, but the wealthiest man in the entire country. Tutu the first mockery as he entered a clothing shop. A group of well-dressed young men lounging nearby snickered at him. "Look at him," one said loud enough for everyone to hear. "He looks like he came crawling out of a haystack." Another laughed. "And now he's walking into that shop. Those shirts cost more than his entire outfit." The farmer, whose name was Elias, paused at the door. He had heard every word. For a brief moment his heart clenched, not because their words hurt deeply, but because he was reminded how quickly people judged others by appearance alone. Still, he said nothing. Inside the shop, he walked over to a plain white cotton shirt. He touched the fabric, smiling gently as if remembering his youth when his late father used to wear similar shirts. The shopkeeper eyed him from behind the counter, his face twisted with annoyance. "Sir, these are expensive clothes. I'm afraid they may not suit your budget. Perhaps you'd prefer the market stalls outside? They sell cheaper things there." The two young men outside laughed harder, one even calling out, "Go on, old man!" "Don't waste the poor shopkeeper's time." Elias looked up at the shopkeeper and said softly, "May I at least try it?" The shopkeeper, rolling his eyes, reluctantly handed the shirt over. He was certain the man couldn't pay. What they didn't know, what neither the shopkeeper nor the mocking youths knew, was that Elias owned vast lands stretching across 3 provinces. He was the man who had quietly invested in mills, warehouses, and banks while still plowing his own fields. His wealth was immense, measured not only in gold, but in the countless families his land fed every harvest. But Elias never allowed his fortune to change him. He still ate his meals of lentils and bread, drank water from the clay pot outside his home, and woke before dawn to tend his animals. People often asked him, "Why live like this when you have enough wealth to buy palaces?" He always answered with the same gentle smile, "Because the soil raised me, and I want to die remembering its touch." To the wedding invitation a few weeks later, his nephew was getting married. The whole village buzzed with excitement. Families bought new clothes, children played in the streets, and vendors sold sweets at every corner. On the day of the wedding, guests arrived in glittering outfits, bright silks, shining shoes, and gold jewelry. When Elias entered, wearing his patched kurta, heads turned. "Doesn't he feel ashamed?" a woman whispered. "Couldn't he at least buy a new shirt for such a big event?" Another added. "He looks poorer than the servants," a man muttered. Some laughed openly. Others shook their heads, pitying the family for having such a backward uncle. Elias, however, remained calm. He smiled, greeted each person, and quietly sat in the back row. To the big reveal as the wedding feast began, a wealthy businessman from the city arrived. He was respected by all, known for his riches and influence. The moment he saw Elias, his eyes widened. Without hesitation, he stood up and walked straight to him. In front of the entire crowd, he bowed his head respectfully. "Sir Elias," he exclaimed, "it is an honor to see you here." The guests went silent. The businessman continued, his voice echoing, "Do you people not realize who sits among you? This man, this humble soul, is Elias Khan, one of the richest men in the country. He owns more land than any of us combined, and his generosity has saved countless lives. I would not be half of who I am today if it were not for his advice years ago." Whispers rippled across the room. Mouths dropped. People who had laughed at his kurta just hours earlier now stared with wide, embarrassed eyes. Some quickly tried to change their tone. "Oh, I always knew he was special. Yes, he is a wise man." But Elias simply nodded and returned to eating his simple meal, as if wealth and respect were never what he sought. The challenge of humility. Still, deep inside, he carried a burden. The challenge of humility is not that you stay humble, but that the world mistakes your humility for weakness. Many times he faced insults. Many times, people called him miserly because he didn't flaunt wealth. Even some relatives mocked him, saying, "What's the use of riches if you live like a poor man?" But Ilias never swayed. He knew that showing off riches wins empty praise, but living with humility wins true respect from God and from those with wisdom. The drought a year later, tragedy struck. The skies withheld rain for months, rivers dried up, crops withered, and famine spread like wildfire. Families starved, children cried for food, and desperation filled the villages. The very same men who had mocked Ilias found themselves on the brink of ruin. Their money could not buy grain, because there was none left in the markets. That was when Ilias opened his warehouses. Barrel after barrel of rice and wheat was brought out. Families lined up, and Ilias stood at the front, handing out food with his own calloused hands. "Take this for your children," he said to one mother, tears streaming down her face. "Feed your family," he told another, pressing a sack of wheat into trembling arms. And when the two young men who once mocked his torn kurta came forward, ashamed and hungry, he didn't hesitate. He gave them food too, and said softly, "Mockery fills the stomach with pride, but humility feeds the world." They broke down in tears. To the legacy, when the drought finally ended, the people realized something profound. True richness wasn't gold, houses, or clothes. True richness was generosity, humility, and kindness. Years later, when Ilias passed away, his funeral was unlike any seen before. Thousands came, rich and poor alike. They didn't come because he was the richest man in the country. They came because he was the kindest. On his gravestone, his family inscribed the words he often repeated, "Judge me not by my clothes, nor by my wealth, but by the seeds of kindness I sow." Final message and call to action. And now, dear friends, I ask you, how often have you judged someone by their appearance? How often has someone judged you unfairly without knowing your story? The world is quick to laugh at patched clothes, but slow to see the richness of the heart. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me if you've ever experienced being judged, or if you've learned to look beyond appearances. I read every comment because your voice matters here. And don't forget, subscribe to Be Kind Always, where we share stories that remind us of the power of kindness, humility, and respect. Hit the like button if this message spoke to you, and share it with someone who might need this reminder today. Because in the end, friends, the greatest wealth is not in what we wear, it's in what we give.